I generated millions in savings for the company, yet when I asked for a fair raise, HR sneered and called me a junior who didn't deserve a seat at the table. I walked out, got hired by their biggest client, and prepared a boardroom ambush that would destroy his career forever. Before this story continues, tell me, where are you watching from today and what's the temperature? Hit that subscribe button, because the look on his face when I walked into that meeting room is something you'll never forget. The air conditioning in the HR office was set to a temperature that felt less like a workplace and more like a meat locker. I sat there, shivering slightly in my navy blazer, my hands clasped tightly on my lap to stop them from shaking. It wasn't the cold that was getting to me, though. It was the man sitting across the mahogany desk, scrolling through his phone as if I wasn't even in the room. Wesley Murphy, the director of human resources. He was a man who wore his arrogance like a second skin, tailored perfectly to fit his expensive Italian suit. He was in his late 40s, with graying hair gelled back meticulously and a watch on his wrist that probably cost more than my entire student loan balance. "So," Wesley said, finally setting his phone down face up. He didn't look at me, he looked at a smudge on his glass desktop. "You requested this meeting, Athena. My schedule is tight. What is it?" I took a breath, steeling myself. I had practiced this speech in the mirror for 3 nights. I was 34 years old. I had been with Apex Supply Logistics for 5 years. In that time, I had overhauled their entire procurement strategy, renegotiated contracts that saved the company $4 million annually, and streamlined a supply chain that had been bleeding money for a decade. I wasn't asking for a favor. I was asking for what I had earned. "Wesley, as you know, my performance review last month was stellar," I began, keeping my voice steady. "The savings I implemented in Q3 alone covered the department's operating costs for the year. Based on my contributions and the current market rate for a senior procurement manager, I would like to discuss an adjustment to my salary. I'm currently being paid 20% below the industry median." I slid a folder across the desk. Inside were graphs, charts, and competitor salary data. It was undeniable proof. Wesley didn't open the folder. He didn't even touch it. He just leaned back in his leather chair, a slow, condescending smile spreading across his face. It was the kind of smile you give a child who has just asked for a pony. "Athena, Athena, Athena," he sighed, shaking his head. "You have such spirit." "It's not spirit, Wesley. It's data," I said, pointing to the folder. "If you look at the numbers." "I don't need to look at the numbers," he interrupted, his voice dropping to a patronizing purr. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Let me explain something to you about corporate culture, sweetie. You see, titles are one thing, reality is another." My jaw tightened at the word sweetie, but I held my tongue. "I am the senior procurement manager. That is my title." "On paper," he said dismissively. "But in this room, in the eyes of the executive board, you are still developing, you are still green." "I am 34. I have 10 years of experience." "And yet," Wesley said, picking up a pen and twirling it lazily, "you lack the executive presence we look for. Asking for a raise of this magnitude, it's aggressive, it's ungrateful, and frankly, it's amateur." He tossed the pen down. It clattered loudly on the glass. "We don't negotiate with juniors, Athena. Be thankful you have a job in this economy. Now, is there anything else, or can I get back to work?" The silence that filled the room was deafening. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, a mix of humiliation and pure, white-hot rage. He hadn't just said no. He had erased my entire career history. He had looked at 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears and called me a junior because it suited his budget or his ego. I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavy, but I forced my spine straight. I reached out and took the folder back. "No, Wesley," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "That will be all." "Good," he said, already looking back at his phone. "Close the door on your way out." I walked out of that office with my dignity bruised, but my mind was already racing. He thought I was just a junior he could bully into silence. He had no idea he had just lit the fuse on his own destruction. I didn't go back to my desk immediately. I couldn't. If I had tried to type an email or answer a phone call in that moment, I would have either screamed or burst into tears, and I refused to give Wesley the satisfaction of seeing either. Instead, I went to the break room, made a cup of black coffee that tasted like burnt mud, and stared out the window at the gray city skyline. We do. And negotiate with juniors. The phrase echoed in my head, bouncing around like a jagged stone. It wasn't just the money. I could have handled a budget freeze excuse. I could have handled, let's revisit this in 6 months. But to be reduced to a child, to have my expertise dismissed because I didn't fit his boys' club image of what a director should look like. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an email notification. Sender, HR Wesley Murphy. Subject, compensation review follow-up. I unlocked my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. He was fast. I opened it. Athena. Per our conversation, this email serves as formal documentation that your request for a salary adjustment has been denied. As discussed, your current role is viewed as a developmental position within the junior management tier. We encourage you to focus on building your soft skills and executive presence over the coming fiscal year. Regards, Wesley. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Developmental position, junior management tier. He was putting it in writing. He was creating a paper trail to ensure I stayed in my box, trapped under a glass ceiling he had reinforced with concrete. He wanted me to read this, feel small, and get back to work like a good little drone. He had made a critical error, though. He assumed I was trapped. I went back to my desk, sat down, and opened my personal laptop. I didn't open my work email. I opened LinkedIn. For the last 3 years, Apex Supply Logistics had been servicing one major client above all others, Titan Industries. Titan was a manufacturing giant. They were the reason Apex had posted record profits. I knew Titan's supply chain better than their own employees did because I was the one managing it from the outside. I knew their pain points. I knew where they were losing money. And most importantly, I knew they were unhappy with Apex's recent service fees that Wesley and the sales team had inflated. I typed Titan Industries into the search bar. I clicked on the Jobs tab. My heart hammered against my ribs. There, at the very top of the list, posted just 6 hours ago. Director of Procurement, Titan Industries. I read the job description. It was everything I was already doing, but on a massive scale. And the salary range listed, it was double what I was making now. Double. But then I saw the name of the hiring manager. Alice Vance, CEO. I froze. Alice. 15 years ago, when I was a 19-year-old intern at a different logistics firm, Alice had been a mid-level manager. She was brilliant, sharp, and kind, but she was being pushed out by a sexist boss who wanted to give her job to his nephew. I had stumbled upon a file, accidentally, that proved the nephew was embezzling petty cash. I was terrified, but I brought it to Alice. She used it to clear her name and secure her severance before moving on to bigger things. We hadn't spoken in years, just the occasional happy birthday or congrats on the promotion on LinkedIn. She was the CEO of Titan now. The climb she had made was legendary. I looked at Wesley's office door. It was closed. He was probably in there laughing about how he'd put me in my place. I turned back to my screen. I didn't just apply. I wrote a personal message to Alice. Subject, long time no see, the director role. Hi Alice. I hope you're doing well. I saw the opening for the Director of Procurement at Titan. I've been managing your account from the Apex side for 5 years. I know exactly where the bodies are buried in your supply chain, and more importantly, I know how to save you 20% in the first quarter. Let's talk. Best, Athena. I hit send. My hand was shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from adrenaline. 2 days passed. 2 days of Wesley walking past my desk with that smug, self-satisfied grin. He would stop by, lean on the partition, and say things like, "Working hard, Athena?" That's the spirit. Keep grinding, and maybe in a few years we'll talk again. I just smiled, a tight, polite plastic smile. Absolutely, Wesley, just focusing on the work. Inside, I was screaming, but I had to play the long game. On the morning of the third day, my personal phone rang while I was in the parking lot. Unknown number. "This is Athena," I answered. "Athena, it's Alice." Her voice was unmistakable, authoritative yet warm. "Alice, I didn't expect a call so soon." "I read your message," she said, cutting to the chase. "You've been handling our account from Apex. You're the A. Rogers on all the monthly reports." "That's me." "Those reports are the only reason we haven't fired Apex yet," she said, her tone dead serious. "Your analysis is the only thing keeping that contract alive. Can you come in for lunch today? Off the record." "I'll be there," I said. The lunch meeting was a whirlwind. I didn't need to sell myself. My work had already done it for me. Alice listened as I laid out a strategy to cut out the middleman, which, ironically, was Apex, and bring the procurement in-house. By the time the check came, she had slid an offer letter across the table. It was more than I had hoped for. Title, director. Salary, 2.5 times my current pay. Signing bonus, full autonomy. "When can you start?" Alice asked, her eyes twinkling. "I have a 2-week notice period," I said. "Standard," she nodded. "But Athena, I know Apex, I know their culture. Be careful when you resign. They can be nasty." "Oh, I know," I said, thinking of Wesley. "I'm counting on it." I walked back into the Apex office at 2:00 p.m. I typed up my resignation letter. It was standard, boilerplate text. "I hereby resign from my position. Thank you for the opportunity. Effective in 2 weeks." I printed it out and walked to Wesley's office. I knocked. "Come in," he barked. I stepped inside. He was eating a salad, watching a golf video on his computer. "What is it now, Athena?" he asked, not pausing the video. "If this is about the money again." "It's not," I said. I placed the envelope on his desk. He frowned, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and picked it up. He tore it open, scanned the single page, and then let out a sharp, barking laugh. "You're quitting?" He looked at me with mock pity. "Oh, honey, did I hurt your feelings that bad? You're really going to throw away a stable job because you didn't get a gold star?" "I found another opportunity," I said calmly. "Where?" he sneered. "Walmart, Target. Who else hires juniors with an attitude problem?" "I'd rather not say until I'm settled," I lied. He tossed the letter into his out tray like it was trash. "Fine, 2 weeks, but don't expect a farewell party. And Athena." "Yes." "Don't come crawling back when you realize the grass isn't greener. We don't rehire quitters." "I won't," I said. "I promise you, Wesley, I will never ask you for a job again." I turned and walked out. He thought he had won. He thought he had bullied a weak employee out the door. As I packed my single box of personal items, a photo of my cat, my favorite mug, and my framed degree, I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't just leaving Apex. I was becoming their boss. And Wesley Murphy had absolutely no idea that in 3 weeks, he wouldn't be dealing with junior manager Athena. He would be answering to Director Rogers. The clock was ticking, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't wait for the countdown to end. The 2 weeks of my notice period were a masterclass in corporate shunning. Wesley had clearly instructed the rest of the management team to treat me like a leper. My access to shared drives was revoked 3 days early. I was uninvited from the quarterly planning meetings I had spent months preparing for. Even the coffee machine seemed to hiss at me when I walked by. I spent those days cleaning up my files, deleting personal data, and enduring Wesley's petty tyranny. He would loudly praise the loyalty of the remaining staff whenever I was within earshot, making sure to emphasize how Apex takes care of those who stick around. It was pathetic, but it was also exhausting. On the Friday before my final week, I was at home, nursing a glass of wine and staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had bitten off more than I could chew. The adrenaline of the resignation had faded, replaced by the cold anxiety of the unknown. Titan Industries was a beast. Alice was a powerhouse. What if I failed? What if Wesley was right, and I was just a junior masquerading as an executive? My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was 9:45 p.m. Caller ID, Alice Vance. I sat up straight, clearing my throat before answering. Alice, is everything okay? Athena, she said. Her voice was different than it had been at lunch. It was tighter, lower. There was no background noise, which meant she was likely in her home office, door closed. I'm looking at the quarterly vendor spend reports for the logistics division. Okay, I said, my pulse quickening. Is there a problem? That's the thing, I don't know yet, but my CFO flagged a variance. A big one. I heard the rustle of paper on her end. For the last 18 months, our spend with Apex has increased by 12% quarter over quarter, but our shipping volume has only gone up by 3%. I frowned. That's impossible. The contract I managed for Apex had fixed rates for fuel surcharges. A 12% hike doesn't match the index. Exactly, Alice said. I asked Wesley about it last month. He gave me some song and dance about premium lane access and expedited handling fees that were apparently buried in the addendums. Premium lane access? I scoffed. Alice, Apex doesn't have premium lanes. We use the same carriers as everyone else. We just slap a priority sticker on the pallet. That's what I thought, she murmured. But I couldn't prove it. Wesley is slippery. He has these invoices coded under consulting and ANC. Ilari services. It's vague enough to pass a standard audit, but specific enough to drain my budget. She paused, and the silence on the line was heavy. I didn't just hire you because you're good, Athena. I hired you because you were on the inside. You know how they operate. When you start next Monday, I'm not just asking you to run procurement. I'm asking you to be my forensic accountant. You think he's skimming? I asked, the realization hitting me like a cold wave. I think he's robbing us blind, Alice replied. And I think he's using the junior manager excuse to keep you and the other honest employees away from the real numbers. He didn't want to give you a raise because he didn't want you looking too closely at the budget. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. It wasn't just ego. It wasn't just sexism. It was greed. He had marginalized me to protect his scam. Consider it done, I said, my voice turning icy. I'll find every penny. Good, Alice said. Get some rest, you're going to need it. The war starts Monday. My final hour at Apex Supply Logistics arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The office was gray and gloomy, matching the mood. I had packed my car. My badge was on the desk. All that remained was the exit interview. Technically, an exit interview is supposed to be a constructive conversation where HR gathers feedback to improve retention. With Wesley, I knew it would be a final attempt to assert dominance. I walked into his office. He didn't look up from his laptop. Sit, he said. I sat. The chair was still uncomfortable. The air was still too cold. So, Wesley began, finally swiveling his chair to face me. He didn't have a notepad or a feedback form. He had a single, thick document stapled together on his desk. Leaving us high and dry, I have to say, Athena, I'm disappointed, but I suppose not everyone is cut out for the big leagues. I'm sure the team will manage, I said neutrally. Oh, they'll thrive, he shot back with a smirk. We've already identified your replacement, a bright young man from sales. He has potential, real executive presence. I almost laughed, of course. A bright young man to replace the woman who did all the work. I'm happy for him, I lied. Is there paperwork I need to sign? Just standard formalities, Wesley said, sliding the thick document across the glass. Acknowledgement of the employee handbook, return of company property, and the standard non-disclosure and non-compete agreement. I rested my hand on the paper. I signed a non-compete when I was hired, Wesley. Why do I need to sign another one now? Updated terms, he said breezily. Just a refresher. Standard procedure for anyone leaving a management role. It restricts you from working for any of our current clients or direct competitors for 24 months. My heart stopped for a split second, then hammered against my ribs. Current clients. If I signed this, I couldn't work for Titan. He knew. Somehow, he suspected, or he was just covering his bases to ensure I couldn't go anywhere useful. I picked up the document and pretended to read the first page. Then, I set it back down. I won't be signing this, I said. Wesley's smirk vanished, his eyes narrowed into slits. Excuse me. I've already reviewed my original contract. My non-compete is limited to a 50-mile radius for direct logistics providers. It says nothing about clients, and since I'm no longer an employee as of, I checked my watch, 3 minutes ago, I am under no obligation to sign new terms. Wesley stood up. He was tall, and he used that height to intimidate people, leaning over the desk until his shadow fell across my face. Listen to me, you little brat, he hissed, the veneer of corporate politeness vanishing completely. If you don't sign that, I will make sure you never work in this industry again. I know people. I will badmouth you to every recruiter from here to Chicago. I will tell them you were incompetent, difficult, and unstable. It was a terrifying threat. 5 years ago, it would have made me crumble. But today I had a secret weapon. I had a job offer he couldn't touch. I stood up too. I grabbed my purse. You do what you have to do, Wesley, I said, my voice steady and calm. But I'm done negotiating. Walk out that door without signing, and you're declaring war, he shouted as I turned my back. I didn't look at him. I reached the door, opened it, and stepped out into the hallway. Goodbye, Wesley, I said. I closed the door on his shouting face. I walked past the cubicles, past the colleagues who refused to make eye contact, and out into the rain. I didn't run. I walked. And for the first time in 5 years, the rain felt like a baptism. The headquarters of Titan Industries was everything Apex was not. It was a sprawling campus of glass and steel, surrounded by manicured gardens. The lobby had ceilings 3 stories high. ND, the security guards didn't just grunt. They smiled and handed me a temporary badge that already had my name printed on it. Athena Rogers, Director. I took the elevator to the top floor, the executive suite. Alice was waiting for me by the reception desk. She wasn't wearing a blazer. She was in a sleek dress that screamed boss. She hugged me, a genuine, warm hug that felt shocking after the cold shoulder at Apex. Welcome home, she whispered, then she pulled back and grinned. Ready to see your office. She led me down a corridor lined with modern art. We stopped at a frosted glass door, Director of Procurement. She pushed it open. The room was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. There was a real oak desk, a meeting area with a sofa, and a whiteboard wall that was currently blank, waiting for my strategy. It's incredible, I stammered. It's what you deserve, Alice said. She walked over to the desk and tapped a thick file folder sitting in the center. Key card is in the drawer. Laptop is set up. Your team is meeting you in an hour. But first. She pointed to the folder. That is the master contract file for Apex Supply Logistics. I walked behind the desk, my desk, and sat down in the ergonomic chair. It felt like a throne. I ran my hand over the file. This was it, the view from the other side of the mirror. I want a full audit, Alice said, her expression hardening. I want to know where every dollar went. And Athena, if you find what I think you're going to find, I'm giving you full authority to handle the vendor review. Full authority, I asked. If they breach the contract, Alice said, you decide their fate. You decide his fate. I opened the folder. The first page was a summary of billing codes. And there, signed at the bottom of the authorization sheet in bold, arrogant blue ink, was the signature, Wesley Murphy. I looked up at Alice. A slow smile spread across my face, not the polite smile I gave Wesley, but a shark smile. I'll get the coffee, I said. This is going to be a fun morning. The team knows you're coming, Alice said, turning to leave. Oh, and Athena, we have a scheduled vendor performance review with Apex in 2 weeks. Wesley is the lead representative. 2 weeks, I repeated. Perfect. As the door clicked shut, I pulled a highlighter from my new pen cup. I looked at the first line item, $50,000 strategic alignment retainer. Strategic alignment, I whispered to the empty room. Let's see about that. I uncapped the highlighter. The hunt was on. My new team consisted of 4 analysts: David, Priya, Marcus, and Sarah. They were young, sharp, and clearly terrified of me. When I called the first department meeting, they sat around the conference table with their laptops open, ready to take notes on whatever draconian policies the new director was about to implement. Relax, I said, taking a seat at the head of the table. I'm not here to slash your budgets or micromanage your bathroom breaks. I'm here because we have a leak. Priya, a senior analyst with glasses and a skeptical expression, raised an eyebrow. A leak? Inventory or cash? Cash, I said, specifically in the logistics channel. I plugged my laptop into the projector. The screen filled with the Apex Supply Logistics annual summary. For the last 5 years, Apex has been our primary vendor. You've all seen the reports. They claim 98% on-time delivery. They claim premium lane usage. They claim their consulting fees are vital for our supply chain optimization. I paused, looking at each of them. I worked at Apex until 3 days ago. I managed this account from their side. And I can tell you right now, half of these claims are fiction. The tension in the room shifted instantly from fear to intrigue. I had their attention. David, I said, pointing to the junior analyst. I need you to pull the raw gate logs from our warehouse for the last 24 months, not the summaries Apex sends us. The actual scan-in times from our security guards. On it, David said, typing furiously. Priya, I continued. I need a cross-reference of every invoice coded as ancillary services, consulting, or strategic retainer. I want to know exactly when those bills hit and who signed off on them. You think they're padding the bills? Priya asked. I know they are, I said. I just need to prove it. We spent the next 6 hours in what I called war room mode. We ordered pizza. We drank enough coffee to power a small city. The office hummed with the sound of furious typing and the shuffling of paper. It felt good to be on this side of the table, surrounded by a team that actually wanted to find the truth rather than bury it. By 4:00 p.m., the conference table was covered in stacks of printouts. I've got the gate logs, David said, rubbing his eyes. It's weird. Show me, I said. He spun his laptop around. See this S. Hipment, invoice 4092. Apex charged us a $4,000 expedited rush fee because they claimed the truck had to bypass a weigh station to meet a deadline. And according to our gate logs, David said, pointing to a timestamp, that truck arrived 6 hours early. It sat in our lot waiting to be unloaded. There was no rush. It was a standard delivery. That's one, I said, marking it on the whiteboard. Find me more. By the time the sun went down, the whiteboard was covered in red ink. It wasn't just a few errors. It was systemic. It was a pattern of calculated overcharging designed to look like standard industry friction. But the real bomb was waiting in Priya's stack of invoices. It was 8:30 p.m. The cleaners were vacuuming the hallway outside. My team had gone home, but I was still there, sitting in the pool of light from my desk lamp, staring at a spreadsheet Priya had emailed me before she left. The consulting fees. Every quarter, Apex billed Titan Industries a flat fee of $75,000 for executive talent retention and strategic HR alignment. I had never seen this line item when I was at Apex. Why? Because it wasn't charged to the operations budget I managed. It was billed directly to the corporate overhead account, a blind spot for a standard procurement manager, but a glaring red flag for a director. I pulled up the digital copy of the contract addendum. The scope of work for this $300,000 a year fee was vaguely defined as ensuring high-level personnel continuity on the Titan account. I laughed out loud in the empty office. It was a bitter, hollow sound. Personnel continuity, I whispered. Wesley had fired 3 account managers in the last 2 years. He had denied my raise. He paid his staff below market rate. There was no talent retention program. I did a quick search on the vendor ID associated with that specific line item. Usually, vendor payments went to Apex's central accounts receivable. But this specific fee, it was routed to a different routing number. I opened the banking verification tool, a perk of being the director. I punched in the routing number. Beneficiary, WM Consulting Partners, LLC. WM. Wesley Murphy. My heart hammered against my ribs. He wasn't just padding the company's profits to look good for his bosses. He was skimming. He had set up a shell company, labeled it as a legitimate service, and was funneling Titan's money directly into his own pocket under the guise of HR consulting. This was why he refused to negotiate with juniors. This was why he kept me in the dark. If I had been promoted, if I had become a director at Apex, I would have seen the P&L statements. I would have seen the money leaving the building. He needed me to stay small so he could stay rich. I picked up my phone and texted Alice. Me, I found it. It's worse than we thought. It's theft. Alice, verify it. Triple check. Me, I have the bank routing number. It's going to a Shell LLC with his initials. Alice, start the printer. I'm coming back to the office. Alice arrived 20 minutes later, wearing a trench coat over her pajamas. We sat together, going through the documents page by page. When we finally laid out the entire trail of evidence, she sat back, looking both furious and impressed. $300,000 a year, she murmured. For 4 years. That's $1.2 million he's stolen from us. And that's just the consulting fee, I added. If we add in the fake shipping surcharges, the total fraud is closer to $3 million. Alice looked at me, her eyes hard as flint. He treated you like garbage because you were the only one smart enough to catch him. He told me I lacked executive presence, I said, a cold calm settling over me. Alice stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Well, Director Rogers, I think it's time we showed him exactly what executive presence looks like. The vendor review is next week, I said. No, Alice turned around, a wicked smile playing on her lips. Push it up. Call it for this Friday. Tell them it's urgent. Tell them the new director wants to realign the partnership. He'll think I'm fresh meat, I said. He'll think he can come in here and bully the new guy into signing a renewal. Exactly, Alice said. Let him think he's swimming with a goldfish. He has no idea he's jumping into a tank with a shark. The next morning, I drafted the email. It had to be perfect. It had to be professional, commanding, yet vague enough to ensure Wesley attended personally. To Client Relations at Apex Logistics, ComCC. W. Murphy at Apex Logistics, com from A. Rogers at TitanIndustries.com, Director of Procurement, subject. Urgent. Strategic Account Review and Contract Renewal. Dear Apex Team, as the incoming Director of Procurement for Titan Industries, I have completed my initial review of our supply chain partnerships. Before we proceed with the next fiscal quarter, I require an immediate in-person meeting to discuss the future of the Apex Titan contract. Given the sensitive nature of the financial adjustments I intend to propose, attendance by the lead account executive and the Director of Human Resources is mandatory. I will not be negotiating with subordinates. Meeting time, Friday 10:00 a.m. Location, Titan Industries, Boardroom A. Regards, A. Rogers, Director of Procurement. I read it over. Using A. Rogers was a calculated risk. He knew my last name, but Rogers is common. And he was so dismissive of me, so convinced I was a nobody, that he would never connect the dots. In his mind, Athena Rogers was unemployed and crying on her couch. He wouldn't imagine I had ascended to the throne of his biggest client in less than 2 weeks. He would see director and financial adjustments and see dollar signs. He would assume I was some outside hire, some corporate hatchet man he could charm or bribe. I hit send. The whoosh of the email leaving my outbox felt like the click of a deadbolt sliding into place. 2 hours later, a reply pinged. From W. Murphy at Apex Logistics Com. Director Rogers. We look forward to meeting you and continuing our prosperous relationship. I will personally attend to ensure clarity on all legacy protocols. See you Friday. Best Wesley Murphy Director, HR and Strategic Accounts. Legacy protocols, I muttered, reading the email on my phone. That was code for don't touch my scam. I walked out to the main floor where my team was working. David, Priya, I called out. Print everything. The invoices, the gate logs, the bank routing traces. I want it all bound in a presentation folder. Make 3 copies. What's the title of the presentation? David asked, poised over the label maker. I thought about it for a second. I thought about the way he had sneered at me. I thought about the junior comment. Title it Vendor Performance Improvement Plan, I said. And underneath that, in smaller letters, termination for cause. David's eyes went wide. We're firing them. Oh, we're doing more than firing them, I said, walking back to my office. We're evicting them. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for the fly to land. Friday morning arrived with a sky the color of slate. It was raining again, a heavy, rhythmic downpour that battered the glass walls of the boardroom. I stood at the head of the long mahogany table, checking the arrangement of the chairs. Boardroom A was designed for intimidation. It was soundproof, with acoustic panels and lighting that could be adjusted from warm welcome to interrogation. I set the lights to cool white, clinical, unforgiving. I placed the 3 bound presentation folders face down in the center of the table. Are you ready? Alice asked from the doorway. She was dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. I've been ready since the day he called me a junior, I said, smoothing the lapel of my own blazer. I was wearing a new suit, deep crimson, a power color. Remember, Alice said, stepping into the room, let him talk first, let him dig the hole. Don't worry, I said, I brought a shovel. At 9:55 a.m., the receptionist buzzed. Director Rogers, your guests from Apex have arrived. Shall I send them up? Send them, I said. I took my seat at the head of the table. Alice sat to my right. David and Priya sat along the side wall, ready to pull up data on the main screen if needed. The elevator doors down the hall chimed. I heard footsteps, heavy, confident strides. Then, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open. Wesley walked in first. He looked exactly the same as he had 2 weeks ago. Same expensive suit, same arrogant posture, same dismissive air. Behind him was a nervous-looking account manager I recognized vaguely as Tom, one of the yes-men Wesley kept around to carry his bags. Wesley scanned the room. His eyes landed on Alice first, and he flashed a charming, oily smile. Alice, good to see you. It's been too long. Then his gaze shifted to the head of the table, to the director. For a split second, there was no recognition. Just a blank look as his brain tried to process the context. He saw a woman in a crimson suit sitting in the seat of power. Then his eyes locked on my face. He stopped mid-stride. His smile faltered, twitching at the corners. He blinked once, twice. Athena, he said. The word came out more like a cough. Good morning, Wesley, I said, my voice projecting clearly across the room. Please take a seat. We have a lot to get through. He stood frozen for another second, looking from me to Alice and back to me. His brain was misfiring. Athena is unemployed. Athena is a junior. Athena cannot be the director. I think there's been a mistake, he stammered, looking at Alice. We're here to see the new director of procurement, A. Rogers. Alice didn't smile. She just gestured to me with an open hand. Meet Director Rog. Hers. Wesley's face went pale. The blood drained from his cheeks so fast it looked like a magic trick. He looked at Tom, who was staring at his shoes, then slowly, reluctantly, pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down. So, I said, lacing my fingers together on the table. You wanted to discuss legacy protocols and executive presence, didn't you, Wesley? He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. He tugged at his cuffs. Athena, I had no idea you landed here. Congratulations, that's quite a jump. It wasn't a jump, I corrected him. It was a correction. Now let's talk about your contract. Right, Wesley said, his voice gaining a little bit of its old friction, though his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. Look, Athena, I know we didn't part on the best terms, but business is business. Apex has served Titan well. Our rates are competitive, our service is. Stop, I said. I reached out and flipped over the first folder in front of him. Open it to page 4, I commanded. He hesitated, then opened the folder. Explain this, I said. He looked down. It was the invoice analysis. The expedited rush fees juxtaposed with the gate logs showing the trucks arriving early. Well, he started, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. These are logistical nuances. Sometimes the paperwork lags behind the physical. Page 7, I interrupted. He turned the page. Consulting fees, I read aloud. $75,000 a quarter, payable to WM Consulting Partners, LLC. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the projector fan. Wesley stared at the page. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I ran the routing number, Wesley, I said softly. It's you. You've been billing my company, your biggest client, for imaginary consulting services and funneling the money into your personal LLC. He looked up. The arrogance was gone. In its place was pure, unadulterated fear. That's an administrative error, he rasped. My finance team must have. Don't, Alice cut in, her voice sharp as a whip. We already spoke to your CFO this morning. He had no idea this LLC existed. He's very interested in seeing these documents. Wesley slumped in his chair. The fight went out of him. He looked small. I didn't give you that raise because I couldn't, he whispered, almost to himself. If I adjusted the budget for salaries, the discrepancy in the consulting fund would have been flagged. So you insulted me instead, I said. You called me a junior. You told me I wasn't good enough. You tried to destroy my confidence so I wouldn't ask questions. I stood up. I leaned over the table, looking down at him just like he had looked down at me in his office. You said you don't negotiate with juniors, Wesley. Well, here is the new reality. I pointed to the door. We don't renew contracts with thieves, and we certainly don't negotiate with rude vendors. I picked up the final document from my stack. It was a formal termination notice. You're fired, I said. Effective immediately. Security is waiting in the lobby to escort you off the premises. And Wesley, the police are waiting outside to discuss the fraud. He looked up at me with watery eyes. Athena, please, I have a mortgage, I have. You should have thought about that before you stole $1 million, I said coldly. Get out of my boardroom. He stood up, his legs shaking. He didn't look at Alice. He didn't look at Tom. He walked to the door like a man marching to the gallows. As the door closed behind him, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 2 weeks. The fallout was spectacular. Apex Supply Logistics fired Wesley before he even made bail. The investigation revealed he had been doing this for years, not just to Titan, but to 3 other smaller clients. He was facing multiple counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. His career wasn't just over, it was incinerated. Titan moved its procurement in-house, just as I had planned. My team and I saved the company $4 million in the first 6 months, legitimately this time. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn evening, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment. It was a Friday. I had a glass of good wine in my hand, not the cheap stuff I used to buy on sale. The city lights twinkled below me. I thought about the journey. I thought about the fear I felt walking out of that office with my box of belongings. I thought about the junior insult. It's funny how life works. The very thing he used to try and break me, my attention to detail, my obsession with the numbers, was the exact thing that brought him down. So, if you're listening to this and you feel undervalued, or if some boss is making you feel small to feed their own ego, remember this. Mistakes made, I stayed too long in a place that didn't respect me. I waited for permission to be great instead of just taking it. I let his definition of success cloud my own judgment. I thought loyalty would be rewarded, when in reality, loyalty to a toxic person is just self-sabotage. Lessons learned. Your worth is not defined by your title, and it's certainly not defined by someone who is too insecure to see your value. Know your numbers. Know your market value. And never, ever let someone gaslight you into thinking you're lucky to have a job where you are being exploited. Actionable advice. Document everything. If you suspect foul play or unfair treatment, keep a paper trail. It's your best defense. Network up, don't just talk to your peers. Build relationships with the people 2 levels above you. That's how I got to Alice. Walk away. The moment they tell you you're not worth it, believe them, not because it's true, but because it's your cue to leave. The best revenge isn't a screaming match. It's success. If this story of justice touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. You never know who needs to hear it.